being able to detach emotionally from something, right, that you thought, was the right path or that you've invested a lot of time in.
Thank you so much for jumping on, Alex. Welcome to the Sports to Business podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So for all of our listeners and everybody watching, we have Alex Orlando today. She is arguably the most successful rhythmic gymnastics athlete that Canada has ever produced. I mean, you have 5 national championships, a Commonwealth record, and then you transitioned from sports. Now you're a director of marketing at Panam Sports, running one of the largest multi-country national events in the history of sports. What a career. Congratulations on such a huge achievement in your life. I can't wait to dive into all these things today.
Oh, thank you. I mean, thank you for pumping me up a little bit there too.
I got the game face on.
I know. No, lovely to be here. And honestly, it's such an honor every time I get to share a little bit of my story, my experience with, your audience and others, because I know you feel the same way. Just sport has given us so much, and we just want to be able to create impact with what we've learned and give back to our community. So it's an honor to be here, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it.
Oh, absolutely. So what are you doing today and these days, especially in COVID?
Oh, well, it's been quite a roller coaster year. I think everyone feels the same way. I saw a very funny meme the other day. It was something like, how is it March next month when last month was March? And I feel like I deeply resonated with that statement. But you know what? It was as difficult as it's been and just such a change. I've really focused on my health, my mental health, my physical health, and really relying on just like that self-motivation from sport to just keep me going, like step by step, no matter how I'm feeling. I think it's been challenging for everyone and everyone's had a different situation, but I really feel for me to keep my head in the game professionally, but also, work on my personal relationships. Like you have to stay motivated to do good, to be better, to feel better. And I just have taken that to heart throughout the pandemic and tried to just better myself and the people around me as best as we can. Right.
I hear a lot of athlete principles, bettering yourself, going back to the basics, taking care of yourself. So I'm sure you're still doing a lot of the, I guess, rest and recover. That's very important as being an athlete as well.
Oh my goodness. Totally. I was just talking to some young athletes a few weeks ago about how I really had to focus on my health. Like I was being unhealthy. Like I had unhealthy habits.
Wow.
So I didn't realize that during like this hustle and grind mentality that I love, and I just love pushing my limits professionally. And I come from an industry where I was on a plane almost every week. I was, my Panam Sports, we work with the 41 countries of the Americas. So that's North, Central, South America, Caribbean. And then we work with the International Olympic Committee. So we're international in Asia, in Europe. I'd fly to Europe for a day and come back. So I was so used to that grind that when it came to a halt, I really noticed that, wow, like I need to get my together. And
you can say it.
I know. I was like, I need to like focus on me. And I started like relearning what I used to put into practice in sport. Like I have a sleep book. Oh, behind me. It's like my favorite book that I read during the pandemic, like focusing on my sleep again, my eating, my recovery, my physical body, like how I was moving, like functional movement. I almost went back to basics, which was really nice and really rewarding for me. So I see it as a positive. I try to look at the silver linings of the situation we're in. And it's been quite a learning experience again, as a retired athlete now kind of like relearning again. Right.
For me, when I left university as a college football player, and I brought the same mentality with me, which was, I'm going to outwork every single person in business. I'm going to outwork every single person because I know I've been there. I spent 40 hours a week on the football field, in the gym while going to class. But after a while, I started hitting a wall. because I think, it's one thing to put in the grind, but also you have to make sure that you're balancing things out. So going back to as you were growing up, Alex, how did you balance all these things, and how did the principles that you learned back then kind of grow with you as you went to the Olympics and all the other great things you did?
Yeah, I mean, I have kind of a unique story because my sport is so unique. And I will say unique, but it really is a little obscure, right? Like it's not a traditional sport, especially not popular here in North America. It's massive in Eastern Europe. Like you go to Eastern Europe and arenas are sold out, thousands and thousands of people are there. But it is like a different type of sport. And when I got into it when I was 5, it's also just a very young sport. So everything is really accelerated. You're competing at 7. Then I was competing for Canada at 10. I got on my first plane by myself to France to go compete in a World Cup, right, at 11. And so you quickly go from like, oh, this is fun, right? Like I was a really energetic tomboy, like total stereotype. But I was like doing everything. I wanted to play soccer. I wanted to run track. I was trying to play basketball. I was horrible, but it's still my favorite sport. But I was like doing all of these things, and I ended up in a sport that's like super performance based. Very similar. Like I compare it to figure skating, like on the winter side. Like it has this aesthetic and this performance piece with the strength and the flexibility and the acrobatics, and the list goes on and on. So from an early age, I just learned the discipline that it takes to achieve goals. And that was something I was going to get into a little bit later on, but especially in business, it's just like if you set goals, and then you want to create a path to achieve those goals. And that was ingrained in me at a young age. If I want to get here, these are all the steps that I have to get there. And I was going to be super disciplined so that I can achieve that goal and then create an even bigger one. And it was that kind of sense of a challenge for me of how much more can I achieve? And, again, you start to get this sense of responsibility at a young age that I'm wearing the maple leaf and I'm representing my country. Like, whoa, it starts to set in that, this is something bigger than me. I can create a huge impact on people around me and do something different with my life. And I think when that kind of set in, I was just like, okay, like got my game face on. I was like, this is what I want to do. And now I'm going to be so disciplined and do everything that I have to do to continue to represent my country and ultimately at the biggest stage, which was the Olympics. And I think that choice, there comes just a lot of responsibility with a choice like that at such a young age. And my parents, immigrants to Canada, they wanted to give me everything that they never had. Sport, it was a luxury. It still is a luxury. That's how I view it. And I had the opportunity to kind of live out their dreams and have them support me, on this kind of world stage, but also realize that, they're doing everything that they can for me. So now like, I'm going to do everything that I can.
You can. Yep.
Right. And it was just like an incredible journey because education was such a big part of it as well. My parents made deals with me every year. Like, you can do gymnastics, but
if you get
like it was
yeah.
it was, you got to keep your grades up. You have to make sure that, you're progressing in sport, but you're also progressing in your academic career. And that was instilled in me at a very,
Awesome.
Young age. So I honestly think it was just discipline and understanding if I want this, I have to study and I have to work really hard in this other area as well, because I want this so bad. I want sports so bad.
You have to do that.
Also, and it was just, it's a balancing act, and, it's difficult and it's tough. It's tough for student athletes, but I think we find a way. I mean, like you know this very well. And it's just like, if we want something, we're going to find the way to work smarter, to work more efficiently, to be able to balance, both.
You make it
So it's
happen,
like,
right?
you know,
You
yeah,
start seeing challenges as just obstacles that you can hurdle over.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah.
I think that's such a key piece, because now even working, in the business world for over 10 years now, after retiring from sport, I see challenges and mountains as fun. Like I'll see this massive, it's like, how much can it be steeper? It's almost like, and it's fun to be able to like push yourself to see how far you can go, regardless if it's a physical mountain or not. But I find that mindset's really unique to an athlete, because we see it as fun versus already starting from a negative place. Like, oh my God, this is way too big. Like I can't, there's no way that I'm not even going to try. And like defeating yourself before you even begin. And I see that tendency a lot in a lot of different people.
Do you think would you phrase it as the underdog mentality?
I don't know if I would phrase it as the underdog, but to be honest, maybe more to yourself. Like I feel like I
Yeah.
always was like, I'm gonna prove to myself, right? Yeah. So it is this underdog
Or
mentality,
prove
I
them
think.
all wrong. Everybody
Yeah,
didn't
like,
believe in me, you know? Yeah.
yeah, and I think that becomes like a really powerful force,
Hmm.
because even in my sport, like I faced a lot of adversity in rhythmic gymnastics, because I didn't have the traditional body type. So in my sport, it's very thin. It's kind of like a ballerina type look and aesthetic. And I was always athletic, like, athletically built. I was always stronger. I was always more muscular. And people always used to tell me, you're never going to make it. Like even at 8 and 9, they're just going like, no, like you don't have the body type. So no matter how passionate you are, you're just not going to get there. And that lit this crazy fire in me where I'm going, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like how are you telling me I can't do something just
Yeah.
because
Just
of how
because
I
of
look?
exactly.
And so there was a part of me that was going to prove to everyone that you can be different and you can be strong. And as women, we can celebrate our strength and our power. Like, let's get away from this, we have to be like beautiful
Look
and
like a woman.
sexy. And
Yeah.
at the same time, like why is that conversation, why are we even having that conversation? It should just be about like fostering the love of sport and movement, and then celebrating our strength. And I think at the time I didn't, obviously I'm more eloquent now. But at the time I like knew it was wrong. I didn't know why, but I knew it was wrong what they were saying. And I just wanted to, show other young girls, other women, that, if you see it, you believe it. Right. So like, I wanted them to see me and believe that they could do it too, or they could achieve, whatever dream they wanted. And I just feel very strongly that representation matters. That's a very big conversation that we can have about a lot of different topics these days, but it's like representation matters. Having women in sport matters, having different backgrounds, body types, religion, sexual identity, like preferences, it matters. And we need to see it, and we need to show the next generation that
Yeah.
no matter what industry you're in, and in sport, like you belong there,
Yeah, you
right?
don't
I
want to be
think it's
putting tags on people ever, or
ever.
categorizing people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what I love about sport is that it brings everybody together. It's such a unifier, but we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do in the industry, but also on the field of play, right? And that's, I'm a big advocate for that, and why I continue to work in sport now. Right?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think it's very similar. Even in like, let's say football, I played football. I think it was always like, hey, if you're not 6'3", 280, you're not playing D-line. Or,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you're not over 6 feet, you're never going to be a receiver. But I think some of the best players you see in the pros were the ones who defied the odds.
Totally. And they have that hunger. They have that hunger, because they're just like, no. I know what I'm capable of, right? And I think it's what's so attractive to me is that like sport, like I could control it. So nobody else can move me. Nobody else can push me when I'm on the bike or I'm running or I'm lifting. I control it. right? So it's like this, it's really like this empowering
Is the one thing
force.
is the one thing that you have full control over, and you can respond to any situation how
Mm-hmm.
you choose to, because you can control this,
Yeah.
power or
Yeah.
force.
And if it doesn't, right, like if you're not getting the results or it doesn't work, or is that we can change it,
Iterate it.
right?
Exactly.
And yeah, and I think leadership is all about change.
Yeah.
I really do. And I think great leaders embrace change. They roll with it, and they revel in change. And I truly believe that. Even just my experience in business, I'm like, you got to embrace it, and you got to be able to like quickly, see that this is going to be more beneficial, and like not hold on to an idea that's just not working. Even if it's your idea, you got to let it go. You got to be able to pivot and change.
I always give this one example. It's so funny. The example of, hey, I want to lose weight, right? And people start doing the treadmill every single day. And I always ask them, like, it's actually my dad used to do this, right? He'd go on the treadmill every single day for a month. He never lost weight. I'm like, hey, you're doing the same thing every single day. You're not losing weight. Why are you still doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And he had no answer. And that concept is so prevalent in every single industry, role, department, sports, business, that we just do things because we got into the motion, we go through the motions of stuff, versus asking ourselves, is this action getting us to our goal? If it's not, change it.
Exactly. And having that, being able to detach emotionally from something, right, that you thought, was the right path, or that you've invested a lot of time in, and I definitely, that's something interesting that I've seen in business as well, that is just so different from sport. Because even if you've invested the time, the money, the effort, if it's not working, it's just not working. If you're not getting that result, and it's okay, but it's accepting that, and then being able to move on, right? And re-strategize, and then be able to execute upon that. And I find that it's difficult for people. I mean, it's a little bit of psychology, but when we invest a lot of time, we feel like we have to continue to invest that time. You can use a relationship example with that, right? Like people are like, oh, I've been in this relationship for 10
but you're
years,
so unhappy.
but I've invested the time, right? And I'm gonna stick with it. And you sit back and you go, why? Because and so I think athletes especially are quite good in the business world at just kind of being like, okay, cut the cord, let's do this, because we're gonna achieve the goal faster this way, right? And if we change directions, for sure.
What do you think about, so a good concept you bring forward here, Alex, is I think failure, or when things don't go your way, right? So maybe when you were in your, let's say, the Olympic run or Commonwealth Games, or in earlier years, examples of when you failed and where you actually used it as almost, and I call this, it's not failure, it's execution, because you learn from it and you iterate, right? So maybe and how you brought that to business today, and what can businesses, like executives today, start to really change their mindset about failure? Because let's face it, we're in a digital first world, and the only way to win is by trying things fast and failing fast.
I completely agree with you. I love failure because it is growth for me. I don't even see failure as a negative word. I think that's kind of the first step, is kind of disassociating failure with something bad and something negative. And I feel like the language that we use in business, but in sport as well, it forms these like strong belief systems, right? Where you don't even know why you think it's bad. You just know automatically your failure, it's something negative. And that's a little bit of, societal constructs as well. But I feel like it's really important, which is why, in sport, I'll use an example. So in 2004, I missed qualifying for the Olympics, my first time around. So I was 16, and everything I had done up until that point was exactly what someone told me to do, whether it was my coach or my nutritionist or the judges. Like everybody had perfectly manicured my career to go to the Olympics in 2004. And I was going to be the youngest Canadian, Olympian to be able to go. And it was going to be this big narrative around, this, story. And I competed at world championships. So in my sport, you get one shot to qualify for the Olympics. There's 300 competitors. The top 20 make it to the Olympics. I was one of the youngest competitors. And I came 21st. And I had done, I competed well. Like I had no major, like there was nothing to like pull out and be like, it was that, you made this mistake or this. I competed well. I was happy with how I performed. And I came 21st, by 1/10 of a point, which is basically nothing, And, my whole world came crashing down all around me because I had associated my entire being and identity with this one goal and this one Olympics. And I had bought in so strongly to the narrative that this was my games. Like this was my story. How is this not happening? And I started playing a little bit of like the blame game. Like it was everybody else's issue, not my own. I'm 16, so it was pretty dramatic. I feel like I just lost my identity in myself. Wow. And it was a time for me to really like step back and reflect on who I was, what made me happy, like what fulfilled me. And through that kind of, because you really have to do the work. Like you have to do the inner work, especially with a loss. And I call it a loss. Like I had to grieve this loss. It was a failure. It was my first major failure on the world stage in front of the media and everybody I knew and my community and everybody that supported me. So I felt like I had let everybody down. And I think that shame was a big part of this journey for me because I just felt like I let everyone down. And my sister, she kind of gave me this like light bulb moment, but my sister, after a few weeks of me like being really low and not able to just like get back on track and get back to the gym, we just had a conversation about like my values. So really like my core values as a person and what I wanted to bring to this world and what my legacy wanted to be, what I wanted my legacy to be, whether it was in sport or not. And I realized that it wasn't about the Olympics and this one event. It was actually about getting the best out of myself. And I wasn't done getting the best out of myself and pushing myself. It was an unbelievable moment.
At that age though, it's so hard to tell yourself that.
Yeah, because it's so easy to be so negative, like human nature, right? It's so easy to be negative and put yourself down versus being able to lift yourself up. And from that moment though, I realized like I had to be my biggest champion for me and kind of cancel out the judgment or the expectations or the pressure that I was receiving from kind of outside or external forces. And I really focused in on like what makes me happy, regardless of medals and glory and the Olympics, like what makes me happy. And it was being back in the gym. And, it was one of those times where I found myself again through the love that I had of the sport. And when I now looking back, anytime I approach like a failure or a loss, or I went after something and it didn't go my way, I kind of always just think back to that time where I was able to kind of accept that this was a situation and realize it created space for something else to grow. Like you were saying, right? Like it created space for me to plant new seeds and for me to be able to grow something else and to be able to kind of continue to progress professionally, personally, like emotionally, as a human and as a woman. So I think I still to this day always just think back on those kind of times where, I'm going, this is an opportunity. This is positive. This is an opportunity, and you have to embrace and love failure because it's going to create greatness. Like it always does, right after like a big failure, like something amazing
Every story
comes.
has failure, right? Even on the big screen. Yeah, there's a reason for it.
Totally. And if I would have quit gymnastics at that time, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. I probably wouldn't be working in sport at all. And because I was 16, I was just starting my career, and I came back and I went on to break, world record, go to the Olympics, but even more so, like, build this network and create opportunities for me to now live my passion through my professional career. And, I never would have had those opportunities if I was like, oh, I'm done. I missed this opportunity. I quit.
Yeah. This is so applicable though to people right now that are working in corporations or teams that are not happy with what they're doing. I think a lot of times they're continuing to do the same thing again and again. And I mean, you touched on a point where you really ask yourself, what makes you happy? Right. And I think a lot of people can apply this, but it's just sometimes when you're into the, I guess, 5 years, 10 years in a career, it's so hard to say, this is it. I'm not going to torture myself even more, just like a bad relationship. Right.
and I totally get it. Like, I get the thought process. But I also then just challenge people and go, life is short. And why do you work so hard? Why do we do all these things if you're not happy?
To be sad.
To not feel, but just like even fulfillment. Mm-hmm. I think athletes, and what makes athletes quite great leaders and team members is like, we want purpose. Like, we seek something that's purposeful. And so we bring that to our organization, but we also know when it's not the right fit. Like, if something is just if it's not really fulfilling you, if you're not making the impact you want to make, like, you make the decision to leave, whether it's immediate or you put a plan in place to then be able to do that. I'm not telling everybody, if you're unhappy, quit your job right now.
I think what you're saying is the thing I really want to dive in on, Alex, is that it's not black and white. There are ways to find a different thing that makes you more happier. It's not that you have to quit right away. There's so many things you can do.
Yeah. And also, so I've been in positions before, Rogers was a good example for me when I was kind of in the corporate space, not working in the Olympic movement or the sport movement. I touched on Sportsnet a little bit, but I was in, trade marketing. Like, I was working with the sales team, helping them sell advertising. I didn't really work in the Sportsnet world. And as much as it wasn't necessarily my most fulfilling job, and I really say that honestly, I took it as a learning opportunity as well. And I know that not everything you're not going to be happy every day. It's not like rainbows every day in whatever job that you're in. But I looked at it as like, how much can I possibly learn from this role and this organization? And I learned a ton. It wasn't the right fit, but I learned how to run one of the biggest, or how one of the biggest Canadian companies is run, the strategy, the execution, the cross-functional teamwork that has to take place, campaign launches, things at such a large scale that I might not have even had the opportunity to learn. So I think for me, it was just always finding ways to be learning. I have like a need to evolve always. It's like an innate need for evolution, and it comes from sport. Like, we're always looking at ways to get better.
Getting better. Exactly.
Always, no matter what we're doing. Like, I need to constantly be learning and evolving. So as long as you can find, those touch points within the organization or the team that you're in now, it is totally useful. And I think that that's more of a perspective. Like, you can choose to see the good and the opportunity in any role, right, that you're in, whether it's your dream job or not.
It's your mindset. And then I think a lot of times, a lot of other folks that I actually interview on the podcast who are a lot older in their careers, 50s, 60s, they all bring this one thing back, which is really fascinating. They say that they all did roles that they didn't like or that were hard, but they did them because they knew that if they did this role, they can have whatever they wanted in terms of the business career afterwards. So I think that's so powerful that sometimes you have an opportunity which nobody else wants to do, but if you can do it, it'll almost be the best thing that ever happened for your career.
Yeah. It's like kind of that saying, I don't know if your coach said it, my coach would always say this. It's just like to get stronger or to get ahead or to be more successful, you have to work on your weaknesses more than your strengths. Like you have to even like zone in on what you're not good at or what you're uncomfortable with or what you don't know. And you have to like shine a light on that and work towards, advancing in those areas. And I find that that's scary for a lot of people. I'm not saying it's comfortable. It's totally uncomfortable. It's way easier to say, I'm really good at this. I feel super confident and I'm going to stay in this area. But it's when you step outside of your comfort zone and say, I don't know how to do this, and being able to ask questions. Like when I started in the job that I'm in now, I had no idea how to negotiate, broadcast deals, like none at all. But you have to be willing to step up and say like, I don't know. So like, who knows?
Who can I learn from?
How am I going to reach? Like, how am I going to reach out? And I did. You find people and you go, listen, like, I want to learn. Tell me, like, this is an area that I want to get better in. And I feel like that's a core piece of advice that I always give anybody and anyone on my team is like, it's okay. Like, you don't pretend. That's like, for me, it's like the worst thing that you could do is like, I hate when people say fake it till you make it. I actually really don't like that term because I'm going, you don't need to fake it. Just learn.
Just learn. Just Google.
Like we have so many resources at our fingertips, way more than us.
The problem is people don't want to put in the work. That's the problem, right? It's not that you can't learn it. I mean, similar story. A lot of people think that because I was in tech that, hey, so where do you do your engineering from? Or what languages can you quit? I'm like, I'm a business guy, MBA. I learned tech on the job, right? And literally, I'm like, it's not hard. Like, execute, find out who knows, Google in your free time and leverage your network. And sooner or later, you're going to learn about it, right?
Yeah. We have this beautiful thing called the internet and LinkedIn. I would always say that, a few years ago, I was like non-existent on LinkedIn. And then I realized, okay, look at all of these unbelievable people, not only that you've gone to school with, but that or that you've been connected through and your circle. I would say like a circle of influence as well, where you go, I know. So you start to realize how many people, not only that but in different industries. So it's limitless. It's limitless opportunities. So I'm a big believer in just being like really honest with yourself and looking in the mirror and going, I don't know this. So and understanding that like that's okay. Like this, it's not, doesn't make you less of a person, doesn't mean that you're less, of a team member or lesser team member or less successful. Just means that like, I feel like people
respect you more.
They do. Yeah. They do. When you're just honest, like you're honest and genuine and you're willing to put the work in. I think that's, like you said, I think it's the willingness to put the work in. And that makes a huge difference, especially within an organization. When you start to think of people and where you want to move people and, giving more responsibility to some of your team members, one of the first metrics I look at is just like your work ethic.
Yeah.
Just like,
I mean, why would you not?
It's like, how do you do you want to learn? Like, how do you take on opportunities? How do you take on challenges? Right. Even more so. Yeah. It's the challenges for me. Like when I see someone really willing to expand and vocalize that, like really communicate that. I think it's a huge plus.
This is the saying where in football, our coach and I think most other coaches say the same thing. It's like, we just want raw talent. We want somebody that is willing to put in the work. We will teach you the skills. And totally. they will always draft someone that brings the fire, that brings the energy over someone who is really talented or knows the playbook, but the attitude's not there. So I think it's exact correlation.
Yeah, completely.
Mm-hmm.
I think too a little bit now, and this is just something, that I've brought in, like when we look at kind of like skill sets and how we've transferred them from sport into business, I feel like from the softer skill side, being able to empower your team. So like understanding that, everybody has a role, no matter how big or how small, every single person has a role and everyone contributes. And to be able to empower people within the roles that they're doing so that everybody succeeds, right? I think that's such an important piece, because when people feel either overlooked or demotivated, like nobody, if you can't get the best out of your people and you can't empower everybody, right? Like it's just, you can't get ahead. Like you're not going to be able, right?
The
to meet your
biggest gap
goals
right now, Alex, the biggest gap I see, at least in the tech side, is that everybody's focused on digital, but nobody's focused on teams.
Yeah, it's almost like you lose that, like that connection, right?
And as a leader, like it's not the tools that are going to make you successful. It's and I would love to ask you this question: can you distill your vision to mission? And does your team know why they're doing their job? Why does it matter? Right?
So important. I'm so glad you brought that up. I think it's just being able to provide a clear vision, like a clear vision that empowers your team, so everybody understands like the direction they're moving in and the goal. I find that in working with some other organizations, like it's very like unorganized or not clear. Like most people don't even know their mission, not even their mission statement, like, but just like their mission as their own team. Like what are you guys, like what is the core purpose for you guys to like be here today? What is the core purpose? What are we working on? How are we going to get there together? Like just like the clarity. I find for me, like leaders, or at least what I work on as a leader, is just trying to be very, very clear with a very compelling vision so that my team is inspired to come to work. They want to come to work. There's a sense of urgency in what we're doing because there's a purpose. I think the disorganization and the lack of a kind of clarity around even what individual people are supposed to be doing, that creates, it's just lack of urgency. It's like the complete opposite of what you want. It's just people become lackadaisical and they just don't feel motivated. And I think from, sport, like as a coach, I'm not sure if you coached football, but like as a coach, your like sole purpose is to not only teach, but like to motivate your players.
Exactly.
And I feel like leaders, like sometimes executives, like we forget that piece, like the human piece, like that human connection, right? As you were just talking about.
I mean, I'll go even as far as, one of the problems right now is executing in a fast environment or executing in digital disruption, right? Yeah. I think if you can just focus on getting your teams aligned to the mission, making sure people are motivated, making sure they're empowered, it doesn't matter how chaotic the environment is, you'll be fine.
Completely. I think of it, like I look back to my team. So, our organization, we own the Pan American Games, and we deliver. So we own and deliver. So we work hand in hand with the like local organizing committee and the team on the ground. One of them, it's the second biggest multi-sport event in the world. 8,000 athletes, they qualify directly to the Olympic Games. Games mode. So if you don't work in this world, it is absolutely nuts. It is crazy. Games mode is like anything goes. You're working 24 hours, 48 hours straight, like no sleep. Like it's because there's months because it's the lead up. So the thing with games and what I actually love and what I thrive on is like there is a date that cannot be moved. So the opening ceremonies July 10th, right?
There's no negotiations about we don't have money, we got to renegotiate timelines. That doesn't work here.
It is like, that is the date. So you do whatever you have to do to get to that finish line. And then once that finish line, like once you cross that finish line, games time happens, which is about 2 weeks of insanity where you're not only dealing like complete chaos because everything looks great to the athletes, the fans, the spectators. It looks phenomenal on TV, but that's all the work that goes on behind the scenes from our team. And I can't even tell you the 3 a.m. calls that you get every day about some issue that's like the competition starting at 9 a.m. It's 3 a.m. There's like some massive issue that like everybody's like up, like going to fix things, like negotiating with suppliers, payment. It's absolutely wild, but I honestly would say it's like an MBA for anybody in the sport industry. Like working in games operations is
I can't
a once in a lifetime experience for people.
I mean,
and those
you talk
out
about
there who know.
I mean, you talk about like, you talk about teams, you talk about problem solving, you talk about, I think just teamwork in general, strategy, executing, firefighting, you know, and in an industry that is pretty near and dear to most people. Sports.
Yeah. And it's, you have to stay calm. And I think that's a really big,
that's huge.
That's a big skill that, you know, I work on, but I think it comes again, it's like this intrinsic part of athletes where we like have to stay calm under pressure, or the best athletes in the world are able to manage their emotions and manage their stress. And I feel like that translates so well into business, because the most effective leaders that I've seen stay very calm under pressure. They actually, you know, they're always like a little bit under what you expect, you know, their stress level to be. Like they always seem like almost like too calm. But they keep a level head, and then they're able to clearly direct, so problem solve and then clearly direct their team. And I think that managing pressure, which athletes are trained to do, like we're trained to perform at a moment, at a very specific moment. We have to turn it on and flip the switch and use everything that we've been training for, like in that one moment, right? And in front of thousands of people, millions of people on TV, and you have to be able to kind of quiet the noise. And I feel like in business, that's such an effective part of any leader, any executive, like to be able to instill the calmness, like right into their team and the organization as well. When and there's fires burning up all around.
I was going to say, especially when a fire is burning, because how the leader, I guess, you know, is perceived, or the way your face looks, even physically under stress, your team feeds off the energy.
Totally.
If you're stressed, your team is stressed.
Totally.
Right. So I think that's huge.
And it's just being able, again, it's like part of that empowerment piece, but it's also like being able to like calm your team and to be really able to get the best out of them. Right. Because I think too, it was a learning experience for me, but when I first managed people, the first time I got into a job where I had maybe 4 people underneath me. It was my first time. I quickly realized that not everybody works like I work, and I can't expect them to be like me, whether it's because I work super fast, like I'm like on top of it, like however, you know, and I really had to be like, okay, managing direct reports and managing people doesn't mean like you're turning them into clones of you. It's how can you get the best out of them, and you kind of put your coach hat on, where all your players are very different, and you have to like know how to get the best out of them, like how to pull it out, and it's going to be very different from this person to this person, right? And that was a really big learning for me, and I've had some really great conversations with, you know, those employees, you know, and now colleagues and peers I see in the sport industry, and we laugh because, you know, it was such a huge learning opportunity for me, and it really changed how I manage people.
And you're
humble forward.
And you're humble enough to admit that, right?
Totally. I know, like I know how I can be. I can be very intense, but my sport, you know, when you think of gymnastics, so different from a team sport, right? So it's an individual sport. It's so intense because of just the amount of hours that you train, like 10, 12 hours a day. Like it's weight room, but it's also like conditioning, strength and conditioning, and then doing gymnastics, right? For eight hours or so. And you're alone. so it's 10 to 12 hours really alone, and that creates intensity level, I think, in individual athletes that is that you can't expect other people to have. It
Absolutely.
just you can't. And that I've definitely learned that, and I'm willing to always, I think I'm just willing to address like my flaws. I think you kind of have to go, okay, like I don't know everything, but I want to be the best possible leader and team member. So how am I going to get there? And the willingness to address that and have those uncomfortable conversations, or just hearing the criticism and getting critique and being able to turn it into a positive. I think that just makes you better, right? And
it's amazing.
I would actually encourage everyone, no matter like what level, no matter what age, like to have like a consistent kind of loop where you're getting like, they're informal. It's not like a formal evaluation, but you're getting feedback. You're getting feedback from whether it's a mentor, someone you work with, someone on your team. But once you start, seek it and consistently, because I think that just shows that you want to be better, right? And not hiding from your evaluation when they
constantly getting better, right? And I mean, facing adversity, failing in the Olympics, applying that to Panam Sports. I mean, you've really transitioned all of these principles from sport into a great career. What would be your advice to females or female executives that right now we know it's a problem, right? In terms of representation, there's a salary gap. There's also a representation gap at the top. What would be your advice to, female managers or just women in general who are in the corporate world trying to make it big, and how can they leverage some of the principles that you've really leveraged in your career?
Yeah. Oh, it's a loaded question. International Women's Day is coming up. It's next week. I've been having a lot of conversations with, female and male colleagues of mine who are, champions of women and want to see change. So this is a topic that's, been on the top of my mind for, the last couple of days. And I would just say that we can't stop fighting. And I really do say it is a fight, because there needs to be change. Like, we need to create radical change. And I think the language that we use and how we speak within our organizations and how we kind of make changes to how our institutions are even, created and how they're run. I mean, it is radical change that is needed. And so I would just say that it's not enough to just talk about it 1 week a year and to highlight it or kind of put it in a strategic plan. And nothing, really gets done. It's like, as women, I feel like no matter where we are, so if you've made it to an executive level or the C-suite level.
Team, remember to like, subscribe, and share with a friend, and visit tanvirvangu.com for a ton of free content and exercises.